Hello and welcome to the live Printing Impressions webinar, High-Speed Inkjet Turns Paper into Money, sponsored by Screen. I'm Dan Marx, Senior Editor of the Impressions Group, and I'll be the host for today's webinar. This is the third installment of Screen's multi-part series, the first two of which addressed total cost of inkjet ownership and the hidden costs of inkjet versus offset. This session will review ways inkjet can be used to win more customers, maximize profits, and offer more services, as well as provide more value to customers. Before we get started, let me take a second to point out the resources widget at the bottom of your console. It looks like an open book. If you missed the Tech Tips video we played leading up to this webinar, you can always click this widget to access our Tech Tips PDF, as well as other webinar resources. Here today to discuss the webinar topic, once again, high-speed inkjet turns paper into money. We have Aron Allenson, Product Manager, high-speed inkjet for Screen. Welcome, Aron, and I'm looking forward to a great presentation.
Thanks, Dan. I appreciate it, and thank you all for spending some of your time with us today. As Dan said, this is the third installment of this series that we're trying to put together. The first was really about the benefits of high-speed inkjet, and the second one, the goal of it was to really help people calculate the true costs. That one was, there was so much to cover in that one. We went really fast, so I apologize if you were on that webinar and it was too fast, but, and then this third one is, how do you mitigate that risk of bringing on this new thing, this new big tool that has, some, costs associated with it. You want to make sure you can cover those costs, make sure that your existing customers will accept high-speed inkjet output, and helping to make sure your salespeople are successful with it, and how to basically win more and lose less. So let's just jump right into it. So unless you're building kind of a brand new facet of your business, probably one of the most important things to consider is making sure that your existing customers are going to be okay, are going to continue to buy from you with what's coming off this new machine, because it is a little different, right? It's not exactly the same. It's very good quality. There's lots of people that say it's offset quality or color toner quality, certainly 100% sellable quality, but it's also can be different. So you want to make sure that it's going to fly and you're not going to have a problem with your base, basically. And I kind of have two ideas that I talk to people about when it comes to sort of doing this test of figuring out if it's going to be accepted. What I call the war room style and the cost to quality ratio. So, kind of a high level 10,000 foot look at these two, and we'll go into more detail with each of them in a second, in a slide or two. But just kind of a high-level view. The war room style, it's pretty straightforward, but it gets you, 60, 65, maybe 75% confidence. It doesn't necessarily get you all the way there to firmly believe that that your customers are 100% going to accept this, right? And then because there's more to it than one or two things. That's why the straightforward approach gets you partway there. The cost to quality ratio, that one gets you a higher level of confidence. It does take more work. It takes a little more time. There's more resources involved. And at the end of it, because there's going to be strong reliance on what companies like Screen, the equipment manufacturers that you're working with, we're going to be giving you information along the way. You're going to have to rely on that information. So you're going to want to make us commit to what we're telling you. You're going to want to make us commit to that contractually even. So a little bit about the war room, right? So in the war room, you're going to have each of us vendors, if you will, run samples. We'll have us run them at our best quality. And then you essentially put the samples up in a room. You could put them on the wall. You could put them out on a table, invite customers to come in and kind of vote. Yeah, this one's good. This one's not. The challenge with this is it is, of course, very subjective. You could have the exact same sample looked at by a few different people, and one could say it's great, and someone else could say, it's okay. You know, the other challenge with this is the reason I say at best quality is because that all by itself is subjective. Unless the person who is the beholder is standing right there, the best quality for one person could be different from the best quality for someone else. So one thing to note when you're doing these, you know, jobs can be run under a production scenario, or they can be run in such a way where every stop is pulled out, right? Where you're tweaking every single file, you're running it at a slow speed. There's lots of things that can be done, but I think it's important to run them in more of a production-like scenario. One thing I want to mention about this war room style is it's easy to kind of say, let's rank these, you know, from best to worst, and we're going to go with the best, right? My suggestion is to sort of separate them in either a pass-fail vote, so to speak. So all the fails we can get rid of, because they're a fail, no matter how inexpensive it was to print them, no matter how fast the printer was able to run. If it's a fail, it's a fail. You're not going to be able to sell it, right? The pass, or the passes, all the ones that pass are commercially sellable, right? Sellable quality. Customer's not going to balk at it. They're going to get the job, and they're going to not give it a second thought because it passes the quality muster, if you will. Excuse me. And the other thing that doing it like that, as opposed to this straight ranking, is it allows you to have some maneuvering, right? You can start to look at things beyond what's the top one versus everything else. So that's kind of the war room style. And like I said, it's pretty straightforward, right? It's a pretty simple exercise. The cost to quality ratio takes more things into account, takes more factors into account, and it gets you a higher percentage of the way there. With that extra work, you're getting a higher degree of certainty. So with this method, you're going to have we vendors, run samples for you. We might run them in multiple different ways. We're going to run multiple sets. We might run them at different ink usage levels, because keep in mind, like I mentioned near the beginning of the conversation, inkjet printers are tools, right? And you can use a tool in a lot of different ways. You can use a tool to push quality, maybe at the sacrifice of production speed or something else. You can also use the tool to reduce costs and maybe have a slightly lower quality or something like that. But the point is, there's lots of different ways to do it, and you're going to want to see that breadth of different samples, because it's really going to be you that decides what's going to work and what's not, right? What's going to fly with your customers, what you can sell. And you're also going to want to run at production speeds. You know, one of the things I mentioned before is when companies like, printer manufacturers are running samples, you can do things like slow the machine down and increase quality. Maybe you run it 40 meters a minute or 80 meters a minute or something. And, you say to yourself, I'm going to run it slower to drive up quality. Well, that's great, but it's not really production realistic. I've worked for commercial printers, and I've worked for financial printers, and I've worked for other printing companies, and getting work on and off is a big part of the game, right? How much work can you put through? And if you have to run slow, I'm not sure that that's really an effective or a realistic test. And then paper is a big one, right? You're going to want us to run on papers that you can actually get, not some boutique paper that maybe is a little pricey or works just right or something like that. Next step is we're going to build out basically a hypothetical month's worth of work. What is a month's worth of work for your company, right? Is that 1 million postcards, 2 million self-mailers? Is it more? Is it how many letters does that look like for a month, right? Not for a day, not for a job, but over the course of a month, what does that look like? Maybe there's product brochures in that mix. Maybe there's some books in that mix. Maybe, it depends on what your specific shop is like, what your workload is like. You're going to build out what you think a month of work looks like. And then you're going to have us run samples for each of those different types of work, right? And once we run those samples, right, we're going to report back to you. We're going to give you the samples so you can do that pass-fail separation, right? Get rid of the fails because they don't matter. And for the passes, we're going to give you what speed we ran it at, what resolution we ran it at, what paper we ran on, ink usage, ink waste, right? All these are costs that go into what did it take to produce this work, right? Were there any clicks? Some company, back when I started in this business with Screen, all our competitors had clicks, right? And Screen came to market and we didn't have any clicks. And it wasn't because we didn't want them. We literally didn't have the ability to do clicks at that time. And so we would say to customers, and no clicks. Well, now all our competitors are kind of doing that. So if they charge clicks, you do need to factor them. If they don't charge clicks, obviously you can ignore that. Paper usage, paper waste, paper cost per foot. They may not be able to give you the paper cost per foot. They may just give you an estimate of a paper cost per foot. I strongly recommend speaking to one or more paper merchants and finding out what is the cost per foot for each of the different types of papers that you use, because that's going to be a big part of this total cost. All this, and there's a couple others, all this is going to be used to determine what does it cost. You're going to boil this down to basically a cost per thousand, and then you're going to look at your hypothetical month's worth of work from the previous slide, and that's going to help you determine what's your cost to produce all this work in a month. And knowing what you can sell it for can help you determine, does this thing actually make financial sense? Is it a good idea for me to invest in this equipment, or is it not? Maybe it's not. It's a great, the high-speed inkjet systems are great for a lot of companies, but they're not the answer for every company. And this kind of exercise helps you get to the bottom of that. Just real quickly, I'll mention the last few things. Number up, that helps you get into machine, productivity, right? If you're doing 1 million of something and it's 4 up, so that goes into your machine cost per hour. Head replacement. It's very easy for a company to print 100 of something or 1,000 of something and say, we didn't burn a single head, so head costs were 0 for this job. Well, that might be true for this job, but if you extrapolate that out over the course of a month, whether it's, per 100,000 or per million feet, or, per 50 liters or per 100 liters of ink, you need that number extrapolated out, right? And same with electricity, right? If you say, hey, how much electricity do you use for this job? Well, you're on press for 2.5 minutes, so not much. But if you look at electricity over the course of a month, it actually can be a big number. Screen is more of an energy sipper. And, for one of our HD printers, which is one that uses more electricity compared to some of our other machines, your busy shop's probably in the $2,000 to $3,000, $4,000 range per month in terms of electricity. But we know based on the drying capacity and the way they're using electricity, some of our competitors are over $10,000 a month for a busy month, right? That adds up. If you've got a $5 or $6 or $10,000 a month difference in electricity, that can be $100,000 a year, right? It can be big numbers. So don't discard electricity. Before I go any further, is there any questions that are being asked, Dan, or can we open it up? Kind of covered a few things already.
I have a couple questions here. Yeah, I have a couple questions here. The first is when companies go in to create that total the cost to quality ratio. In your experience, are there any specific things that they're often surprised to learn?
The stuff on the screen now really encompasses everything I've experienced. The thing that people get surprised by probably the most is electricity, because it really is. It's one of those things that you don't think about too much. One of the screen salespeople outside of the industry is actually friends with someone who put in a competitive machine. And so they had kind of a friendly conversation after. And one of his comments was, this thing does use a ridiculous amount of electricity. I would say paper waste, you want to calculate that, right? It's not easy. I'm not saying this stuff is easy, but it matters.
Okay, and kind of almost a similar question, but if somebody is really kind of approaching this for the first time and they say, to calculate a month's work, where would I even begin? Are there a couple key metrics they should pull to start as a baseline?
It's a good question, and I think it's different for every single company, but I guess I would look at the historic type of work that your company does, or that each company does, right? The last place I worked, we had Hagen OA, and we could pull reports on the kinds of work we did, and I guess I would say that might be a good place to start, right? So look at the work you've done over the last few months. What is, from a high level, what does that look like? Not how many postcard jobs we did, but how much, maybe one easy way to do it would be how much paper do we buy for this group of jobs, which all fit into the self-mailer bucket, if you will. How much paper did we buy for this group of jobs, which maybe falls into some other bucket. And from that, you can kind of calculate ballpark, right? It's not an exact science, but ballpark about how much you did for different types of buckets of work. Okay. I guess that would be my suggestion. You got to kind of segment the work you've done into categories.
Okay. And then in terms of, let's say, downtime, like time needed to do routine maintenance on the machine, should that be factored into that calculation, or is that different?
I think you can factor it in if you are going to be at or near capacity early on. And here's what I mean by that. If you are at or near capacity, time spent on maintenance is time not spent producing. But certainly in the early stages, before most companies, when they put these in, they're not at capacity very quickly. They need time to build up. And so maintenance time is not necessarily reducing production or money-making time. If you think of the time when the machine is being used to actually make money, it's when it's producing. Well, if it was either sitting idle because you don't have work, or it's being worked on for maintenance because you don't have work, it's still the same answer. You're not losing anything. But I think it's a good number to know. How much maintenance do you need in a month, right? Does this thing take 8 hours a month worth of maintenance? Is it an hour a day? Is it 20 minutes a day? I think those are good things to know, because at some point you will be at a higher capacity and you will need to know those things.
Okay, thank you. Those are all the questions we have at this time. So let's keep going.
Great. Awesome. And I will try to stop periodically. So please do put your questions in, and I'll do my best to answer them. And I'll say as a side note, for any of this stuff, if anybody attending wants to discuss this stuff further, I'm more than happy to help. Yeah, just reach out to me. Thank you. So, in this cost equality exercise, if you will, of course, quality matters, right? We have the pass-fail test, and we get rid of the fails, right? Quality does matter, but at the end of the day, no one is getting up and saying to themselves, my goal is to make the best quality today. What they're doing is they're getting up and saying, I need my company to make money today because I have employees to pay, I have bills to pay, I want to take care of myself and my family. Quality matters, but really money matters more. And so you have to look at the big picture. Quality matters in the backdrop of the cost to produce that quality and the time to produce that quality, right? I am going to ask you guys kind of a favor, actually, if you don't mind. We have two survey questions. This is the first one. And if you don't mind, I would really like your opinion, how you'd weigh these items in terms of importance to your business. What's more important? What's the most important thing to your business? Is it best quality, possibly at lower speed, possibly at slightly higher running costs? Or is it, if you could get sellable quality? I don't mean junk quality. I mean like sellable quality that customers are 100% going to accept, but at real production speeds and aggressive running costs. What's more important? And I'll just give another 10 seconds or so to let you guys answer. And I think I just click the next here. Oh boy, well, that tells us the answer there. I'm surprised by that, but not very. I thought it would be, 20% saying best quality. That's interesting to know. So thank you very much. I've got one more question for you, hopefully equally as easy to answer. What helps you make more money? What helps your company make more money? Quality of print, speed to produce at sellable quality. Again, same thing. It's sellable quality, not junk quality, or lower running costs. I think from the first question, I probably could get rid of the first bullet here. So I'll just give you guys a few more seconds. Wow. You guys, you don't need to be cajoled into making up your mind. Thank you very much. I appreciate your input. I really do. Thank you.
They're kind of a homogenous group.
Yeah. Yeah.
So Aron,
everyone's...
yeah, based on some of these, the results we have from these polls, a question comes to mind, and that is, what is it that makes companies invest in high-speed inkjet? What is that deciding factor for them, and what is the trigger point?
Well, I mean, it's business, right? So I think at the bottom line, it's about money, right? It's can I make money with this thing? I think at a more at kind of a lower level, that's kind of the high level answer. At the lower level, more detailed level, I think a lot of companies that are looking at high-speed inkjet now are asking themselves, maybe they know that certain types of work run effectively on high-speed inkjet. And so they ask themselves, at what point do I have enough work to cover, X% of the nut, right? X% of my fixed costs so that I can potentially bring this thing in, not be bleeding money right away, but I have a chance to keep costs managed while I build the business. I think a lot of companies look at it like that because, the opposite, right, is what we used to do, right? You build it and they will come. Those days are long gone. But I remember the days when a printing company would buy a new litho press, and they would advertise it in Graphic Arts Monthly. And that was really all they needed to do to start selling it. And those days just don't happen anymore. So I think that's the answer. Companies find or look at and determine, do I have enough work to cover a portion of it that they feel comfortable with? And then the entrepreneurial spirit takes over. Can I build the rest and turn this into a profit center? Can I make money with it?
Okay. We have one more question if we would just want to step back just a second here. And this goes back to capturing some of those costs. And this person says, we are looking to replace a 6-color offset press. Should we expect more or less electricity usage?
Well, I'm going to make a couple of assumptions, and I'll say those assumptions out loud. I'm going to assume that it's a full-size press, like a 40-inch press or a 105 or something like that. And I'm going to assume that it has some type of inline coater, like AQ coater, and I'm going to assume that it's not UV interdeck cured or anything like that. I'm going to say it's going to be pretty close, I think. I honestly don't know the amount of electricity that a full-size litho press uses, but I know about what drying systems use. You have bigger motors on the litho press, and that'll use some of the electricity, but the drying system is what uses the most electricity. Yeah, I think you can find out, though, because certainly the inkjet printer manufacturers can give you an approximate kilowatt per hour usage, at running full speed with the dryers on all the way. And you might be able to get that from your press manufacturer, but even if you can't, if you know the amperage and voltage usage, and how many phases and things like that, there's websites where you can plug that in. I can help you find those websites if you need it.
Okay.
That's how I would do the comparison.
Very good. Thank you.
All right. Sorry for rambling. It was a very good question, and I didn't have a ready answer.
We can move forward.
Oh, good. Yeah, great. Screen went white for a second and got a little worried. Salesperson success. So here, this is that question, right, at the very first slide that we talked about, right? So we looked at how do we determine, what we should consider in terms of machines, right? We have the pass, fail, and then factor in the cost to it. But then how do I, I've brought this thing in, how do I make sure I'm successful with it, right? How do you make sure you're not just covering costs, but you're actually going to, transition and turn this thing into a profit center and make money with it, right? There is no real magic to it. It's not, the high-speed inkjet printers, they're not magical. There's nothing about them that all of a sudden you bring it in and, some bright light starts shining and, people start calling you to give you jobs. You still have to sell it. Your salespeople still have to sell it. But, the good news is that it's not that different from your existing printing capabilities. And all you guys are like, what? Why am I even here? Not that different from existing. Technically, it's not that different from toner, or color toner. You can produce pretty much the same work, but there are some differences, and those differences are where this value is, where those differences are what can be leveraged, right? Whoops. And I'll kind of digress for a second. Back in 2003, 2004-ish, when color toner really started hitting its stride, you had everything had, we were talking about short run transfer, offset transfer, and we were talking about variable. There were so few companies actually being successful with variable. It didn't stop us from talking about it all the time. At the same time, runs, even with variable, runs kind of had to be short just because of the speed, right? If you wanted to put a job on that was 100,000 pieces, you were there for a long time. There were some companies that kind of got around this by having almost like a fleet of printers. I knew companies that had like 10 iGens or 18 Indigos and stuff, and so they could take on bigger jobs. By doing that, that had a whole host of other challenges with it. I worked for a company. We had a couple of Next presses, and we got this big job in once. I think it was like an 800-page book, and they wanted 400 copies. That thing was on press for like a month. High-speed inkjet, that's where some of the differences are, right? With toner, can they both produce color and color variable? Yeah, but color on high-speed inkjet is extremely consistent, right? Even compared to an offset press. Offset press, the new modern presses are much better at it, but you're constantly chasing the ink-water balance, right? With toner systems, a lot of them have built-in spectros, so they're constantly adjusting themselves to try to maintain quality, but it's up and down too. Color's up and down on those systems. With inkjet, really there's only two consumables, right? Ink and heads. And the heads are either working or they're not working. It's not like heads are kind of working. So the heads are really consistent, and the ink is super consistent, because if it's not super consistent, it causes head problems. So color on inkjet systems are really very consistent. Productivity, that job I mentioned a minute ago that was on press for a month with a pair of Next presses, it's a matter of hours. It wouldn't even be a full day with one of our 520 HDs. We would just tear through the thing. Paper cost is less. I've worked for a lot of commercial printers, and there have been times in my past where we quoted on a job, we thought we were being pretty aggressive, and we didn't win the job, and we'd go back later and find out what the customer ended up paying for the job. We're like, we can't even buy the paper for that. And at that time, I remember, we're all commiserating with each other, right? They must be desperate. They're buying the work, right? They're not making any money. They can't be making it. Well, maybe they were making money on it, but they were doing it with roll paper. They were paying 20% less for the paper. Looking back, that's very possible. I have paper cost is less here twice in a row, because the imposition factor actually matters, right? So, when you're buying sheeted stock, it comes in some set sizes, right? You may get a 2840 sheet. For a full-size press, you might get a half-size sheet. There's some set sizes. And if the job your customer has you running is such that you can't efficiently get it out of a sheet size, even if you do something like a Dutch cut or something like that, maybe you have significant waste compared to a roll-fed system that has essentially an infinitely variable cutoff. You can maybe set your cutoff in such a way where you're wasting the minimum amount of paper. And so paper costs can be less from that perspective too.
Hey, Aaron, we got a couple questions kind of stemming from this slide. The first one is, so just person is noting that says notation that paper cost is less. Are we talking uncoated and non-treated product here? Are we talking more coated stock?
Non-treated, yes. Uncoated or coated, it doesn't matter. So if you're comparing coated to coated, rolls are going to be less. If you're comparing uncoated to uncoated, rolls are going to be less. If you're comparing, let's say, uncoated sheets to uncoated inkjet treated roll stock, might not be less. Might be close. But I was comparing like to like, if that makes sense.
Sure. Okay. And then the other question is kind of a comment. You had mentioned that heads are either working or not working. This person just says, is kind of indicating there is a middle space where says we have Inkjet, and I've gotten statements in the mail printed by Inkjet that have white lines, clogged nozzles, so maybe working but not entirely functional. Would you classify that as not working?
Yeah, I won't argue with you on that. I would say that's not working. But yes,
Okay.
I understand what you're saying.
Okay.
Yeah, that is. So I'll just elaborate for other people who maybe don't know. So if you were to look at the face of an inkjet head, it has a lot of nozzles or jets, and it's possible for a jet to be either clogged or partially clogged. We call that a deviated jet, meaning that it's not completely clogged, it's partially clogged. And so the ink getting jetted out, instead of going straight out, it goes out at an angle because the orifice is partially clogged. I would say that's not working and needs to be addressed, but I think the person who raised that point was saying, well, that could affect print quality, which it can.
Yep.
It wouldn't affect color too much except for in that area. But I think your point is very valid.
Okay, thank you.
Any others, Dan, before I go on?
No, you can move ahead.
Okay, cool, thanks. So versions, it's digital, right? So you can have as many versions as you want. Late stage changes, I'm positive some of you guys, if not all, have experienced this where customer says, hey, it's got to be in the mail on Friday. I'm going to get you files on Monday. And Monday afternoon rolls around. They said, looking like Wednesday, but still got to be in the mail on Friday. When you have a multi-step process where you're printing, you're maybe making proofs, making plates, maybe even if it's just a digital proof, like a PDF proof now, still a step, right? You're making plates, you're going on press, you're making your shells, you're cutting those shells, you're bringing those shells back into the laser room. Late stage changes, that can be tough, right? When you have a lot of steps like that. When you have high-speed inkjet, you're basically going from file to production, especially if you have inline finishing. By the way, pros and cons to inline finishing, that is a whole conversation all by itself, which, like I said, I'll be happy to have with anyone, or you can have it with whoever you're comfortable with that would know, but you go into that eyes wide open. Putting your finishing inline definitely has some benefits and definitely has some drawbacks, and you want to be aware of those ahead of time. So you're in the know, basically. Design changes, very much a combination kind of late stage changes. And, I think I skipped inventory obsolescence. So if you have like a litho shell and black toner imprint variable imprint, you've got to print, maybe you're doing 6 mailings worth of shells, or maybe you're doing 6 months worth of shells. How many do you need? You need 250,000. You need 275,000. I can give you a better price per thousand if you do 275. You have all those conversations, and then it gets stuck on the shelf, and maybe the wrong one gets grabbed one time, or you run out of one version but not another, or something happens. There's some spoilage, and then design changes, kind of that same line, what happens partway through that 6-month period when your customer says, yeah, I want to do something a little different. That can be a little bit of a challenging conversation, right? Color variable, of course, it's digital. The printer doesn't slow down. It doesn't cost more to print color variable. I'm thinking that someone's going to mention this if I don't, someone on the webinar here. So if you're doing color variable and one variable version has a lot of color and another has less color, there will be a difference in the amount of ink you use for those. So you could potentially have that, but that kind of is what it is. You're going to have those versions anyway. So it's just part of the production. You would want to be able to account for that ahead of time. if you can, which is, it's just a matter of knowing what you're going to be printing, or at least having a good idea around it. And cost per piece, right? You're going to want to know from us vendors, probably the most important thing, what's the cost per piece, right? And that's all of those things put together, divided by whatever run length there was. That's what you're trying to get to. So I'm going to back up a second. So I didn't say something about cost per piece that I wanted to. So cost per piece, when you're comparing high-speed inkjet to toner systems, almost always, I can maybe think of the maybe 1,000 or more samples that I've run or seen run. I can think of maybe one, maybe two, where it was going to cost more to produce it on inkjet than toner. And after some basic changes that really didn't affect quality, it flip-flopped the other way. It is, you almost never see it where inkjet is more than toner. And the vast majority of the time, even printing full color inkjet, it's less expensive to produce it that way than it is with litho shells and black imprint. It just really is. That's the real magic, the benefit of inkjet, right? All of these things. And these are the kinds of things that your salespeople really need to be able to communicate. Why is production speed important to your customer? Not my customer, that's you, right? To your customer, right? And production speed isn't important to them. What is important is that I'm running behind, I still need to get this out, and you need to be able to produce this and meet my SLA. That's how production speed has value to your customer. How does color consistency have value to your customer? Why is it important to them? They don't care about color consistency. Oh, my brand color is going to look the same throughout the run and from month to month and job to job. Oh, well, that's important because people recognize my brand partially based on color. That's color consistency is the thing. What it does for them is the value. What makes us, and by us I really mean you, buying this roll-fed, full-color, high-speed inkjet printer better for you and for your customer? They need to communicate that. Your salespeople need to be able to communicate that to your customers, right? They need to be able to weave a story around those values. And by the way, the value is different for every one of your customers. What's important to one of your customers is different than what's important to another one. They all kind of fall into a few categories, but in many ways, it's how you weave that story that makes it matter to one customer more versus another. And those categories that I was just talking about, I think if you boil them down, if you distill them to their root level, there's really three things that makes a customer want to give you work, wants to give your company work, right? It's comfort level. They feel good about your company. That could be salesperson relationship. It could be because they've done business with you for a long time. It could be because you've never failed them, or you've always done a great job for them. You've always put 100% effort in. Lots of reasons that they're comfortable with you. But that's one of the reasons that companies give you work. Another is that you have a value that they really need, right? There's something that you can do that others have a hard time or even can't do, right? Maybe that's maybe the people you have know what's important to your customer and they know how to do it without being asked. Maybe it's some software that you've developed that really does what they need it to do, and they can't do it themselves without you. They can't really get it somewhere else, or to get it somewhere else would be pretty hard. That's kind of, people talk about stickiness. That's kind of the stickiness factor, right? Or maybe it's because for the type of work they do, or maybe this one job, you're the most cost effective, right? And all those things, high-speed inkjet can help you address, right? All those things are things in one way or another, high-speed inkjet can help you because it brings value to you that you can pass on to your customer It certainly helps from a cost-effective standpoint. And being able to do those things, some of the things that we talked about on the previous slide, can give a comfort level that your customer is going to get what they need. Right? Now, Screen, we're not as well known as some of our competitors, but we are one of the leading manufacturers of high-speed inkjet systems in the world. We've built and sold well over 1,000 of them, getting closer to 2,000. And we have over 250 in the US. Okay, so we've built a lot of systems. We've built and installed, and we're helping customers be successful with for a lot of different companies. Our equipment is excellent. We're competitive from a pricing standpoint. We might be the most flexible of the manufacturers out there. We really have a never say no attitude, where most of us who work for Screen Americas have worked for printing companies at one point or another. Some of us have spent most of our career at printing companies and have only moved over to Screen in the last few years. For me, I've been at Screen for, it'll be 10 years pretty soon. But other than that, most of my career has been at different printing companies. And I would say very proudly, we probably, and this is important, probably have the best service organization in the industry. Of course, our competitors will argue that point, but I will say, ask any of our customers. They'll tell you, even customers that have our equipment and competitive equipment, ask them what we're like. All of that is nice. All of that is cute. All of that is fun, whatever. We don't think it's enough. Screen doesn't think it's enough, right? There's actually more to it, and that's kind of the selling side. How do you turn this thing into money? How do you so I bring in this big piece of iron, and I need to turn that actually into money, right? And so towards that goal, towards your team, helping your team come up to speed as fast as possible and be successful with it, that's a big part of what Screen does, right? And we help your team, your sales team, to be able to communicate your value and your high-speed inkjet value, and how those two things together, you with your equipment, turn into 1 and 1 equals 3, right? For your customers, because that's where it really matters. We help you with being creative and how a job might run. That sounds like, okay, that's a lot of happy talk or whatever. But trust me, I said right from the beginning, these are tools, right? And of course, you can use them in a very straightforward manner. But sometimes you're challenged in a situation, a customer asks you for something that might not be straightforward. And there might be a creative way to use the system to actually give them what you need, what they need, and help you to win the job. Done that more than once with customers. Being inventive in how the machine is used, kind of similar, right? It's a tool. You can use it a lot of different ways. And being flexible. How can Screen help you succeed? That's really our goal. So again, all this might sound like a lot of PowerPoint BS, but for Screen, we have, to our customers, a never say no attitude. We don't like to say no. We might not be able to say exactly this, yes, no problem, exactly the way you want. We might say, well, we can't do that, but we can do it this way, or we can do it this way, or how about this, or does this help you? It becomes a conversation. We try to understand what's important to you and then try to find the best ways to help you get there. And for us, that's a big part of what sets us apart. And I would just say, don't take our word for it. Ask any of our customers. There's plenty of them out there, and would love for you to ask them and hear it directly from them. So for me, that's kind of it. Dan, are there any other questions?
Yeah, I think in terms of that, going back a couple slides to that idea of selling this new type of printing to your customers and what they care about. They don't care you got a new machine. They care about what you can do differently to, as you said, offer them more comfort or give additional value. Do you have any sort of quick real life examples of where that approach has been used successfully, and how did that go?
Sure. So, I mean, certainly SLAs is a good example, right? So speed to get something out. We don't have to put it on a lot of different machines, which we're putting it on one machine. So, it's very consistent, and we have this one machine has great speed. So I'll give you an example. Our HD, our 520 HD, comes in a couple of different flavors, but if someone had to get out 1 million postcards in a day, you could do it with one machine, right? You'd be working hard to do it, but the machine 100% can get it done. Another example is the whole late stage changes or versions, right? I'll say something I call upstream commingling. So let's say there's a company that has a mailing that's a lot of different versions, and those versions are not driven by geography, right? So two neighbors might, across the street from one another, might get different versions. Well, in traditional mailing, you have to print those versions separately, and you can maybe get better postal rates by using a commingling machine. That's a whole nother step, and it can add time and things like that. Well, with high-speed inkjet, if you're printing the background and the variable all at one time, why can't you commingle those records before it even prints, right? And so that lowers postal cost and shortens time to delivery and things like that. So is that a value to your customer? Maybe not for customer B, but maybe customer A is like, oh, I definitely need that.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And then this is just going back a little bit, but you had mentioned that idea previously, that cost per piece, there was a flip-flop between the cost of doing toner and the cost of doing inkjet, and you said some adjustments were made that really didn't affect quality or the look of the piece. What specifically was done to flip-flop those costs?
Yeah, good question. I've seen that done a few times. So for one thing, we had a customer that was running a job. They were pretty new to inkjet, and they were running on they were trying to get the cheapest paper they could. And that particular paper was extremely absorbent. It was a mechanical paper. It was like not a newsprint, but one up from that. And it was just absorbing ink like crazy. So in order to get the color, they had to really open up the ink. And we suggested a different paper. It was actually a little better quality paper, cut the amount of ink needed to get better color way down. And at the end of the day, the paper cost was mitigated completely, and it flip-flopped the other way. So actually going to a better paper allowed them to use significantly less ink, get to better color, and change the cost profile of the job.
Okay.
That's one example. Another example is maybe a style of color management. You can use more GCR or UCR, maybe move your curves around or turn on some filters, things like that that can basically help use less ink to get better color.
Okay. And then one more question, which is, obviously it's been an interesting year and a half past, and I know some companies have been holding off on some of their purchase plans for capital investments. Why is now a good time to make the move? And if so, why? Yeah,
so the screen person, if I put on my screen hat, I say, yeah, of course it's a good time. It's always a good time. Whenever you're ready to spend some money, it's a good time. But the realistic answer, I think, is it depends on your business. If you are feeling like your competitors are able to do things that you're not able to do, you may have to do something like this as a defensive move. Because if they invest in something like this and all of a sudden they're winning jobs that you're not able to catch anymore, it could be a challenge. Or if you have opportunities. I think it depends on your business and what your outlook is and what your situation is. I wish I had some better answer, but going through this exercise will actually give you the answer to that, right? The beginning of this deck was all about what's the exercise I do to determine if now is the right time. And at some level, unless you're extremely fortunate, you're going to have a decision to make as to how much risk you want to take, because it's probably not the case where it's going to be completely risk-free and you can completely cover all your fixed and variable costs with just the work you're going to transfer over. There's probably be something you're going to have to bet on the come a little bit on. And that's where the second part of this deck comes in, is helping your salespeople to sell it. That's a big part of it. Something really important to screen. I've worked for, I don't want to say the names, I've worked for well-known toner equipment manufacturers, and they had quote unquote business development programs. And what that really meant was that they had a bunch of stock samples that no one would ever relate to. And I'm sorry to all my old colleagues, talking heads that would give the same speech over and over again about variable and charging more and don't be a print provider, be a marketing services provider and all that junk. And, screen, we're way more interested in actually helping you succeed than having some program we say we executed. Great.
Okay, that's all I have right now. If you want to move into your conclusion here, go right ahead.
Yeah, for me, that's kind of about it. I would like to say thank you to everyone who's attended. I really appreciate your time. I know that you're all very busy. And I would just extend that at any point. You can find me at Screen, and I'll be happy to try to answer your questions. Technically, I'm not on the sales side. I'm a product manager for Screen, so I'm not going to try to actually sell you anything. I'm really just going to try to answer your questions and help you better understand paper or high-speed inkjet or ink, or the way heads work or the way they don't work, to the one person's point, and things like that. So feel free to reach out to me. And thank you again.
Yeah, thank you, Aron. Well, it looks like we're just about out of time for today. On behalf of Printing Impressions and Screen, I want to thank you for attending today's webinar. Be sure to check back to our webinar page to get information of all of our archived webinars. Those are the ones we've obviously run in the past and upcoming webinars that we have on the schedule. So if you'd like to take a minute to fill out the brief feedback survey that will appear on your screen next, we'd be very grateful. It helps us improve these programs for the future. So with that, thanks for joining us. I hope to see you online again for another Printing Impressions webinar. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you.